Scientists decided to discard crop waste in an arid field. Over time, something incredible began to happen. The result of the scientists' action changed the world forever, but an unexpected event transformed everything in an even more surprising way. Before hearing this exciting story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories. The rising sun painted the sky with golden hues when Sarah opened her eyes, awakened by the familiar aroma of ripe apples that invaded her room. She stretched, feeling the weight of her 35 years and a lifetime dedicated to the family orchard. She got up and walked to the window, observing the vastness of apple trees that extended as far as the eye could reach. Dreamland Orchard, as it was known, had been the pride of the Miller family for generations. Sarah could feel the love and sweat of her ancestors impregnated in every tree and every fruit. But today that legacy was threatened. She descended the wooden stairs that creaked under her feet, finding her father, Robert, sitting at the kitchen table. The 60-year-old man with graying hair and calloused hands stared at a cup of coffee with a distant look. "Good morning, Dad," Sarah said, trying to sound cheerful. Robert merely nodded, his expression heavy with worry. "The bank called last night," he murmured. "We have until the end of harvest to pay off the loan or we'll lose everything." Sarah felt a knot form in her throat. She knew that the orchard's financial situation was difficult, but she hadn't imagined they were on the edge of the abyss. "How much is left?" she asked, fearing the answer. $200,000, Robert replied, his voice breaking. "It's impossible, Sarah. Even with an excellent harvest, we won't reach that amount." Sarah sat down, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. Dreamland Orchard was more than just a business. It was the heart and soul of the Miller family. Losing those lands would be like losing a part of themselves. "There must be a solution, Dad," she said, more to herself than to Robert. "There's always a way out." At that moment, Sarah's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Jason, her ex-boyfriend and current buyer for the largest supermarket chain in the region. "Need to talk to you. It's urgent. Can you meet me at the town cafe in an hour?" Sarah frowned. She and Jason had broken up almost a year ago when he chose his career over their relationship. What could be so urgent now? "Dad, I need to go out for a moment," she said, getting up. "I promise I'll think of something. We won't lose the orchard." Robert just nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and despair. Sarah got ready quickly and took her old pickup truck, driving along the winding paths between the apple trees. The aroma of ripe fruit filled the air, reminding her of happier times when the future seemed bright and full of possibilities. Arriving at the town cafe, she spotted Jason sitting at a corner table. He seemed nervous, drumming his fingers on the table while anxiously looking out the window. "Sarah," he said, standing up when he saw her. "Thanks for coming." She sat down, maintaining a neutral expression. "What's so urgent, Jason?" He took a deep breath before speaking. "The supermarket chain I work for is planning a major expansion. They want to buy land in the area to build a distribution center." Sarah's heart raced. She could already predict where this conversation was heading. "They're interested in Dreamland Orchard, Sarah," Jason continued. "They're willing to pay very well, more than double the market value." Sarah felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. The proposal was tempting, especially considering the desperate financial situation they were in. But sell the orchard? Abandon her family's legacy? "I know it's a difficult decision," Jason said, noticing her expression. "But think about it, Sarah. This would solve all your family's financial problems. You could start over, debt-free." Sarah stood up abruptly, feeling suffocated. "I need time to think," she said. "This isn't a decision I can make alone or in haste." Jason nodded, understanding. "Of course, I understand. But don't take too long. The offer is time-limited." As she left the cafe, Sarah found herself facing a dilemma that seemed to have no solution. On one side, the opportunity to save her family from financial ruin. On the other, the prospect of abandoning everything that had always defined who she was. As she drove back to the orchard, her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The sun was now high in the sky, bathing the apple trees in a golden light that seemed almost magical. It was then that Sarah noticed something strange. At the edge of the orchard, where there was normally just an arid, lifeless field, she saw an unusual glow. Intrigued, she stopped the truck and got out to investigate. As she approached, her eyes widened in astonishment. There, in the middle of the sterile field, was a single apple tree. But it wasn't an ordinary tree. Its branches seemed made of silver, and the leaves had a golden glow that sparkled under the sunlight. Sarah reached out, gently touching one of the leaves. It was real, not an illusion. How could this magnificent tree be there in the middle of nowhere? As she contemplated the mysterious tree, Sarah felt a strange sensation of hope ignite in her chest. Perhaps, just maybe, this tree was a sign that not everything was lost, that there was still magic and unexplored possibilities in Dreamland Orchard. With a new sparkle in her eyes, Sarah returned to the truck. She didn't know how, but she was determined to find a way to save the orchard. The silver tree was a silent promise that miracles were still possible. As she drove back home, Sarah couldn't imagine the twists that fate still had in store for her and for Dreamland Orchard. The journey that was beginning at that moment would test her courage, her determination, and her faith in ways she could never have predicted. The sun continued to shine on the apple trees, as if nature also conspired to keep hope alive. And on the horizon, clouds were forming, heralding changes that would transform not only the orchard but the lives of everyone around it. Sarah arrived home with her mind racing. The discovery of the mysterious tree and Jason's proposal mixed in her thoughts, creating a whirlwind of emotions. She found her father on the porch looking pensively at the orchard. "Dad," she called, hesitant. "There's something I need to tell you." Robert turned, noticing his daughter's troubled expression. "What happened, my dear?" Sarah took a deep breath before revealing Jason's proposal. As she spoke, she saw her father's face turn pale. "Sell the orchard," Robert murmured, incredulous. "But this place is our life, our history." "I know, Dad," Sarah replied, sitting beside him. "But maybe it's our only option to get out of this situation." Silence hung between them for a few moments, heavy as the clouds that were beginning to form in the sky. "There's something you need to know," Robert finally said, his voice low and charged with emotion. "Something I've kept for a long time, waiting for the right moment to tell." Sarah looked at her father, intrigued. "What are you talking about?" Robert rose slowly. "Come with me. There's something I need to show you." He guided Sarah to the old barn at the back of the property. The place was full of rusty tools and dusty boxes. Robert headed to a dark corner and removed some boards from the floor, revealing a small secret compartment. From inside, he pulled out an old book, bound in leather worn by time. "This diary," he explained, "belonged to your great-grandfather, the founder of Dreamland Orchard." Sarah took the book carefully, feeling the weight of history in her hands. As she opened it, her eyes widened. The pages were full of detailed notes, plant drawings, and what appeared to be alchemical formulas. "Your great-grandfather wasn't just an ordinary farmer," Robert continued. "He was a scholar of nature, a man who believed in the magic of the earth." As she leafed through the pages, Sarah came across a drawing of a tree that looked exactly like the one she had found earlier, silver with golden leaves. "Dad, I saw this tree today," she exclaimed, showing Robert the page. "In the arid field, at the edge of the orchard." Robert was dumbfounded. "Impossible. That tree, according to the diary, is the tree of abundance. Your great-grandfather spent his entire life looking for it, believing it had the power to regenerate sterile lands and bring prosperity." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "But how did it appear just now?" "I don't know, my daughter," Robert answered, his voice trembling with emotion. "But if what's written in this diary is true, it could be the answer to all our problems." At that moment, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Sarah and Robert ran back to the house, protecting the precious diary. In the safety of the living room, they began to study the contents of the book more carefully. The pages revealed secrets about forgotten cultivation techniques, rituals to bless the land, and mysterious potions made with natural ingredients. "Look at this," Sarah pointed to a passage. "It says that the sap of the tree of abundance, when mixed with the earth, has the power to make even the most arid soil fertile. Robert nodded, his eyes shining with a mixture of hope and skepticism. But how can we be sure this isn't just a legend? There's only one way to find out, Sarah replied, determined. We have to try. The rain was now falling heavily, transforming the world outside into a grey blur. But inside the Miller home, a spark of hope had been kindled. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, eager to put into practice what they had discovered. She and Robert headed to the field where the mysterious tree had appeared. To their surprise, the previous night's rain seemed to have had a magical effect on the tree. It was even more radiant, its golden leaves glistening with dewdrops. Carefully, Sarah collected some of the silvery sap that dripped from the trunk. Following the diary's instructions, they mixed the sap with the arid earth around. Now we need to wait, Robert said, looking at the sky. The diary mentions that the results may be visible after the next full moon. The days that followed were filled with expectation and apprehension. Sarah had to balance work in the orchard, which continued to demand constant attention, with secret visits to the field where they had planted seeds treated with the magical sap. A week passed without visible changes, and Sarah began to feel the weight of doubt. What if it was all just a legend? What if they were wasting precious time chasing a fantasy? It was then that Jason reappeared, anxious for an answer about the purchase proposal. "Sarah, the investors are getting impatient," he said, during a tense meeting at the town cafe. "We need a decision soon." Sarah felt her stomach churn. The pressure was increasing, and she didn't know how much longer she could hold the situation. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah went out for a walk through the orchard. The full moon bathed the apple trees with its silvery light, creating an almost magical setting. Without thinking, her steps led her to the field where they had planted the seeds with the sap from the mysterious tree. And it was then that she saw it. Sprouting from the previously arid soil, small green seedlings were rising toward the night sky. Sarah fell to her knees, gently touching the tender leaves. It wasn't her imagination. The sterile land was actually coming to life. With a racing heart, she ran back home to wake her father. Together they returned to the field, marveling at the miracle unfolding before their eyes. "It worked," Robert whispered, tears in his eyes. "Your great-grandfather's secret. It was real." Sarah hugged her father, feeling a wave of relief and hope flood her. "This changes everything, Dad. We can save the orchard." But as they celebrated their discovery, they didn't notice a figure hidden among the trees, observing everything with eager eyes. Jason had followed Sarah, intrigued by her mysterious behavior in recent days. Now he had witnessed something that could change not only the fate of Dreamland Orchard, but perhaps the future of agriculture in the entire region. The moon continued, its path across the sky, indifferent to the dramas unfolding under its light. In the previously sterile field, new lives were sprouting, promising a future that no one could have predicted. And so, as the night progressed, the destinies of Sarah, Robert, Jason, and Dreamland Orchard intertwined in ways that none of them could imagine. The secret of the Tree of Abundance had been revealed, but its true power and the consequences of its discovery were still to come. Dawn brought a new energy to Dreamland Orchard. Sarah and Robert could barely sleep, anxious to check the progress of the miraculous seedlings. When they reached the field, they were amazed. Where there was once only arid land, now sprouted a green carpet of young and vigorous plants. "It's incredible, Dad," exclaimed Sarah, kneeling to examine the sprouts up close. "I've never seen anything grow so fast." Robert smiled, his eyes shining with a mixture of joy and caution. "It's a blessing, no doubt. But we need to be careful, daughter. Our secret of this magnitude can attract unwanted attention." Little did he know how prophetic his warning was. At that very moment, miles away, Jason was in a tense meeting with his superiors at the supermarket chain. "Gentlemen," Jason began, his voice trembling slightly with contained excitement, "I believe we've discovered something revolutionary at Dreamland Orchard." He then reported what he had witnessed the night before, carefully omitting his personal connection with Sarah. As he spoke, He saw the executive's eyes widen with growing interest. An agricultural technology capable of making arid lands fertile overnight, questioned the CEO, leaning forward. This could be worth billions. Exactly, Jason agreed, tasting victory. I suggest we reconsider our offer for Dreamland Orchard. We don't just want the land, we need this technology. As the executives animatedly discussed the implications of the discovery, Jason couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He still had feelings for Sarah, but ambition spoke louder. This was his chance to reach the top, and he couldn't let it slip away. Back at the orchard, Sarah and Robert worked tirelessly to expand the use of the magical sap. Following the diary's instructions, they began applying small amounts to different parts of the orchard. The results exceeded their most optimistic expectations. The apple, trees treated with the sap, flourished with renewed vigor, producing larger and more flavorful fruits than they had ever seen. This will revolutionize our production, Sarah exclaimed, biting into a freshly picked apple. The flavor was incomparable, an explosion of sweetness and freshness that made her eyes fill with tears of joy. Robert, however, seemed worried. Sarah, we need to think carefully about how we're going to handle this. If people find out... Dad, Sarah gently interrupted, this could be the solution to the problems of so many farmers. We can't keep this just for ourselves. Before Robert could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of a car. It was Jason, and his expression was a mixture of anxiety and determination. Sarah, Mr. Miller, he greeted, approaching. We need to talk. The tone of his voice made Sarah shudder. There was something different about Jason, an intensity she didn't recognize. What's happened, Jason? She asked, trying to stay calm. Jason took a deep breath before speaking. I know about the magic tree and what you're doing here. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah and Robert exchanged looks of panic, while Jason continued. My superiors are very interested in what you've discovered. They're willing to offer a substantial amount, not just for the land, but for the technology behind this. Sarah felt the blood freeze in her veins. Jason, you don't understand. This isn't a technology that we can simply sell. It's something special. Special? Jason laughed without humor. Sarah, this is revolutionary. Think of the good we could do, the number of people we could feed. Robert stepped forward, his voice firm. Young man, some things don't have a price. This orchard and its secrets are our family's legacy. They're not for sale. Jason's expression hardened. You don't understand the opportunity you're wasting. This is bigger than just a family orchard. As the discussion heated up, none of them noticed the solitary figure observing them from the edge of the woods. It was Martha, the village elder from the neighboring town, known for her wisdom and connection with nature. Her wise eyes absorbed the scene with concern. The tension in the air was palpable. Jason, frustrated with the refusal, made one last attempt. Sarah, think about it. This might be your only chance to save the orchard and ensure a prosperous future. Sarah felt torn. On one hand, Jason's offer could solve all their financial problems. On the other, there was something deeply wrong about selling such a precious and mysterious secret. It was at this moment that Martha decided to reveal herself. She walked slowly toward the group, her presence immediately calming the environment. My dears, she said softly, some gifts of nature are not meant to be owned or exploited. They are entrusted to us so that we may be their guardians. Everyone turned, surprised by the unexpected intervention. Martha continued, her eyes fixed on the magical tree in the distance. The tree chose this place, this family, for a reason. Perhaps the real challenge is not how to profit from its gift, but how to honor it and share it wisely. Martha's words hung in the air, laden with meaning. Sarah felt a sudden clarity, as if a veil had been lifted from her eyes. She's right, Sarah finally said, turning to Jason. We can't sell this, but maybe we can find a way to use this gift to help others without compromising its special nature. Jason seemed ready to argue, but something in the determination in Sarah's eyes made him hesitate. He realized he had underestimated her connection to the orchard and its secrets. What if, Sarah continued, an idea beginning to form, Instead of selling, we collaborated, using the knowledge we have to help other farmers in a controlled and respectful way. The suggestion caught everyone by surprise. Robert looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Jason, in turn, seemed to be reconsidering his approach. Martha smiled, nodding in approval. Sometimes the middle path is the wisest. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. As the sun began to set, tinting the sky with golden and rosy hues, the group remained silent, each absorbing the implications of what had been discussed. Dreamland Orchard was on the verge of a great transformation. The secret of the magical tree could change not just the fate of the Miller family, but potentially the future of agriculture throughout the region. However, Martha's words echoed as a reminder. Some gifts come with a price, and the true challenge would be finding the balance between progress and preservation, between ambition and respect for nature. As night fell over the orchard, Sarah knew that the decisions they would make in the coming days would shape not only their future, but that of many others. The weight of this responsibility was immense, but for the first time in a long time she felt truly hopeful. The journey that had begun with a mysterious tree was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, and promised to be full of surprises and challenges that would test them all. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activities at Dreamland Orchard. Sarah, Robert, and Jason, now united by a common purpose, worked tirelessly to develop a plan that could benefit not only the Miller family, but the entire agricultural community in the region. News about the mysterious revitalization of the orchard began to spread, attracting the curiosity of neighboring farmers and even some local journalists. Sarah and Robert found themselves having to balance the desire to help with the need to protect the secret of the magical tree. On a sunny morning, while Sarah was inspecting the new seedlings in the formerly arid field, she was surprised by the arrival of Mrs. Wilson, an elderly farmer whose small property bordered Dreamland Orchard. "Miss Sarah," called Mrs. Wilson, her eyes shining with curiosity, "is it true what they're saying, that you found a way to make dead land bear fruit?" Sarah hesitated, uncertain about how much she should reveal. "Well, Mrs. Wilson, we're experimenting with some new cultivation techniques." The elderly lady smiled, a gleam of hope in her tired eyes. "You know, my land doesn't produce like it used to. If you could teach me a bit of these techniques, maybe I could save my little piece of ground." Those words deeply touched Sarah's heart. Here was someone who, just like her family, was struggling to keep a dream, a legacy, alive. "Mrs. Wilson," Sarah said, making a decision, "how about you come tomorrow? We can talk better and maybe do some tests on your property." The smile that lit up Mrs. Wilson's wrinkled face was all the confirmation Sarah needed that she was doing the right thing. That night, Sarah gathered her father and Jason to discuss how they could help other farmers without revealing the complete secret of the magical tree. "We can dilute the sap in a larger amount of water," suggested Robert, leafing through the old diary. "This would allow us to help more people without depleting our supply." Jason, who had brought his business experience to the equation, agreed. "And we can offer this as part of a soil revitalization program, combining the sap with traditional techniques of composting and crop rotation." Sarah smiled, feeling energized by the collaboration. "Exactly. This way we'll be sharing knowledge and helping people, not just giving a miracle remedy." In the days that followed, Dreamland Orchard transformed into an informal agricultural learning center. Farmers from all over the region began to appear, attracted by stories of sterile land recovery and surprising increases in productivity. Sarah, Robert, and Jason worked in harmony, each contributing their unique skills. Sarah led practical demonstrations, Robert shared his traditional wisdom mixed with the secrets of the diary, and Jason helped organize workshops and create a more formal structure for the program. One day, while guiding a group of young farmers, Sarah noticed Martha, the village elder, silently observing from a distance. After the class, Sarah approached her. "Martha, it's good to see you here. What do you think of what we're doing?" The elder smiled enigmatically. "You're planting more than just seeds, my dear. You're cultivating hope." Sarah felt a comforting warmth in her chest. We're trying to do the right thing, sharing what we've learned without revealing everything. Martha nodded wisely. The true magic, Sarah, isn't just in the sap of that tree. It's in shared knowledge, in the strengthened community, in renewed dreams. As they talked, they were interrupted by a commotion coming from the center of the orchard. Running to see what was happening, Sarah was astounded by the scene. One of the oldest apple trees, which hadn't borne fruit for years, was now loaded with apples of a vibrant and unusual red. "Impossible," murmured Robert, touching the fruits with reverence. "This tree was practically dead weeks ago." Jason, who was nearby, seemed equally amazed. "This goes beyond anything I've ever seen in terms of agricultural recovery." Sarah picked one of the apples and, under the watchful eye of everyone, took a bite. The flavor was indescribable, sweet but with a complexity that seemed to carry the very essence of the earth and sun. "It's as if I could feel the entire history of the orchard in this single bite," she said. Moved, Martha approached, her eyes shining with ancestral knowledge. "The tree is responding to the love and care that you're spreading. It's sharing its blessing." In that moment, Sarah had an epiphany. "That's it," she exclaimed. "It's not, just about using the magical sap. It's about reconnecting people with the land, with traditions, with respect for nature." News of the miraculous apple tree spread quickly, drawing even more attention to Dreamland Orchard. Journalists began to appear, wanting to know the secret behind the sudden prosperity of the region. Sarah, Robert, and Jason found themselves facing a new challenge: how to deal with the growing fame without compromising the true secret of the orchard. It was Jason who suggested a creative solution. What if we create a story, not a lie but a narrative that captures the essence of what we're doing without revealing the magical details? Sarah enthusiastically agreed. "We can talk about rediscovering ancestral techniques, about the importance of community and respect for nature." Robert, initially hesitant, ended up agreeing, "as long as we don't lose sight of the true purpose of all this." Thus, Dreamland Orchard began to be known not only for its exceptional fruits, but as a model of sustainable and community agriculture. Sarah found herself at the center of a silent agricultural revolution, inspiring others to rethink their relationship with the land. As the sun set on another productive day, Sarah walked through the orchard, reflecting on the amazing journey that had begun with a single magical tree. The air was impregnated with the sweet scent of ripe apples and the soft buzzing of bees. Reaching the edge of the woods, where the tree with golden leaves continued to mysteriously shine, Sarah felt a deep gratitude. Dreamland Orchard was no longer just her family's legacy. It had become a beacon of hope for an entire community. However, as she gazed at the horizon, Sarah couldn't help but feel a pang of apprehension. Success brought with it new challenges and responsibilities. And, in the back of her mind, a question persisted. How far could the magic of the tree go? And what would be the consequences of completely unveiling its secrets? With these questions echoing in her thoughts, Sarah turned to head home, knowing that dawn would bring new challenges and opportunities. Dreamland Orchard was flourishing in ways she could never have imagined, and her journey was far from over. The success of Dreamland Orchard didn't go unnoticed beyond the borders of the small community. On a sunny morning, Sarah was surprised by the arrival of a convoy of luxury cars. From the main vehicle emerged an elegant woman with a penetrating gaze, Dr. Victoria Reed, a renowned scientist and executive of one of the country's largest biotechnology companies. "Ms. Miller," Victoria greeted with a calculated smile, "I've heard wonderful things about what you're doing here. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership." Sarah felt a chill down her spine. Victoria's presence represented exactly the kind of attention they had been trying to avoid. "Dr. Reed, it's a pleasure to welcome you, but I'm afraid there's a misunderstanding. We're just a family orchard." Victoria laughed softly, interrupting her. "Come on, Ms. Miller. We both know there's something more happening here. My company is willing to invest millions to develop and distribute your special technique on a global scale." Sarah's heart raced. The offer was tempting, but the risks were immense. "I appreciate the interest, Dr. Reed, but our focus is on helping our local community. We're not interested in expansion at this time." Victoria's expression hardened for an instant before returning to her professional smile. "I understand, but think carefully, Ms. Miller. With our resources, we could transform desert areas into productive oases. Imagine the global impact." Before Sarah could respond, Jason appeared, attracted by the commotion. His eyes lit up when he recognized Victoria. "Dr. Reed, what an honor to have you here," Sarah observed with growing discomfort, the ease with which Jason and Victoria began to discuss potential business. She could see ambition shining in Jason's eyes, rekindling her doubts about his true intentions. That night, a tense meeting formed in the Millers' living room. Sarah, Robert, Jason, and surprisingly Martha, the village elder, discussed the pros and cons of Victoria's offer. "It's a unique opportunity," argued Jason, excited. "We could help millions of people around the world." Robert shook his head, skeptical. "And at what cost? We would lose control over the use of the sap. Who guarantees they wouldn't use it for selfish purposes?" Sarah felt torn. The desire to do good on a large scale fought against the instinct to protect the secret that had been entrusted to them. It was Martha who finally broke the impasse. "My dears, the tree chose this place for a reason. Its magic wasn't made to be bottled and sold. It thrives through care, respect, and connection with the earth." Her words seemed to calm the storm of emotions in the room. Sarah felt clarity forming in her mind. "Martha is right. We can't risk the sap falling into the wrong hands, but that doesn't mean we can't expand our impact in other ways." In the days that followed, Sarah worked tirelessly on a new plan. She proposed creating a training center at Dreamland Orchard, where farmers from all over the country could come to learn sustainable cultivation techniques, mixing traditional wisdom with carefully selected innovations. The idea quickly gained momentum. Farmers who had benefited from the teachings of Dreamland Orchard volunteered to help. The community united to build accommodations and classrooms using ecological techniques. However, not everything was rosy. Victoria's rejected offer had unexpected consequences. Rumors began to circulate about suspicious practices at Dreamland Orchard. Agricultural inspectors appeared for surprise investigations, and some important buyers began to hesitate in doing business with them. Jason, frustrated with the decision to reject the partnership with the biotechnology company, became increasingly distant. Sarah caught him several times on the phone, speaking in a low voice, and suspected he still maintained contact with Victoria. One night, while walking through the orchard to clear her mind, Sarah made an alarming discovery. Near the magical tree, she found fresh footprints and marks, indicating that someone had collected samples. Alarmed, she called an emergency meeting. Robert turned pale upon hearing the news. "If someone discovers the secret of the tree, we need to protect it better," Sarah declared, determined. "But we also need to find out who did this." Suspicions inevitably fell on Jason, but Sarah refused to believe he could betray her trust in that way. Still, doubt gnawed at her heart. Meanwhile, the training center flourished beyond expectations. Farmers from all parts of the country arrived, eager for knowledge. Sarah found herself leading workshops, sharing not just agricultural techniques, but a philosophy of life based on respect for nature. One day, during a practical class, Sarah noticed a particularly attentive and curious young student. Her name was Emily, and something about her reminded Sarah of herself years ago. After class, Emily approached Sarah with eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Miss Miller, what you're doing here is amazing. I have some ideas that might help further expand the program's impact." Sarah smiled, feeling an immediate connection with the young woman. "I'm all ears, Emily. Why don't you tell me during a walk through the orchard?" As the two walked the paths between the apple trees, discussing ideas and dreams, Sarah felt a renewal of her own passion and purpose. It was as if the orchard was not only nurturing the trees, but also cultivating a new generation of guardians. However, as the sun set, painting the sky with golden hues, Sarah couldn't help but notice a solitary figure observing them from a distance. It was Jason, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. In that moment, Sarah realized she was at a crossroads. The future of Dreamland Orchard, and perhaps much more, would depend on the choices she would make in the coming days. The magic of the tree had triggered a series of events that were far beyond anyone's control. As the shadows lengthened and night approached, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Dreamland Orchard was about to face its greatest challenge, and she knew she would need all her courage and wisdom to guide it through the approaching storm. The tension at Dreamland Orchard grew with each passing day. Sarah found herself divided between managing the increasingly popular training center and the growing concern for the security of the magical tree's secret. Suspicions about Jason continued to torment her, but she refused to confront him without concrete evidence. One morning, while Sarah was inspecting the orchard with Emily, her new protégée, they made a disturbing discovery. Several trees showed signs that samples had been collected during the night. "This can't be a coincidence," murmured Sarah, examining the precise cuts on the branches. Emily, with wide eyes, whispered, "Ms. Miller, last night, I saw someone leaving the orchard. Very late, I couldn't identify who it was, but—" Sarah's heart raced. "Emily, this is very serious. We need to investigate, but discreetly." That night, Sarah decided to stand guard. Hidden among the trees near the magical tree, she waited, with all senses on alert. The hours passed slowly, the silence broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. Suddenly, a noise caught her attention. Footsteps were cautiously approaching. Sarah held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure emerged from the shadows, and under the moonlight, she recognized the familiar face. It was Jason. The betrayal hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She watched, paralyzed, as Jason collected samples from the magical tree with practiced skill. "Jason!" she finally managed to call out, her voice trembling with anger and disappointment. He turned, surprised, almost dropping his equipment. "Sarah, I can explain." "Explain what?" Sarah stepped forward, furious. "How you could betray our trust like this?" Jason shook his head, a mixture of guilt and determination in his eyes. "You don't understand, Sarah. This is bigger than us. With this discovery, we can change the world." "Changing the world at what cost?" Sarah retorted. "Destroying the natural balance, turning something sacred into a commercial product?" Before Jason could respond, lights came on throughout the orchard. Robert, alerted by the commotion, came running, followed by several workers and students. "What's going on here?" Robert demanded, looking from Sarah to Jason. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, explained the situation. The disappointment on Robert's face was palpable. Jason, seeing himself cornered, tried to argue, "Don't you see the potential? With Dr. Reed's resources, we could eradicate world hunger." "At the cost of this place's soul?" Martha's voice sounded, surprising everyone. The elder emerged from the shadows, her penetrating gaze fixed on Jason. "Some gifts weren't made to be exploited, young man. They demand respect and understanding." The silence that followed was broken by the distant sound of sirens. Someone had called the authorities. The following hours were a whirlwind. The police arrived. Questions were asked, statements were taken. Jason was taken for questioning, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and betrayed trust. In the days that followed, Dreamland Orchard found itself at the center of a media storm. Journalists camped at the gates, speculating about stolen agricultural secrets and corporate conspiracies. Sarah, exhausted and shaken, took refuge in the company of Emily and Martha. The three women spent hours discussing the future of the orchard and how to protect its precious secret. "Maybe," Emily suggested one day, "the problem isn't the secret itself, but how we're approaching it. What if, instead of hiding, we educated people about the importance of natural balance?" Martha smiled, nodding in approval. "Wisdom beyond your years, young one. Sometimes the best way to protect something is by sharing its true meaning." Inspired by these conversations, Sarah began to develop a new plan. She decided to transform the crisis into an opportunity to educate the public about sustainable agriculture and the importance of respecting natural cycles. With the help of Emily and other dedicated students, Sarah organized a series of lectures and workshops open to the public. They talked about ancestral cultivation techniques, the importance of biodiversity, and how small actions could have a big impact on the environment. Surprisingly, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People from all parts of the country came to learn and be inspired. Dreamland Orchard, instead of being seen as a place of suspicious secrets, began to be recognized as a center of innovation and ecological wisdom. Meanwhile, the legal case against Jason unfolded. During the trial, evidence emerged that he had been manipulated by Dr. Victoria Reed, who had promised him a prestigious position in her company in exchange for information. Sarah, despite the pain of betrayal, felt a pang of pity for Jason. She could see how ambition and the genuine desire to make a difference had clouded his judgment. On a particularly difficult afternoon, after a long day of testimony in court, Sarah found herself walking alone through the orchard. Approaching the magical tree, she noticed something strange. The golden leaves seemed brighter than normal, and there was a soft humming in the air. Suddenly, an intense light emanated from the tree, enveloping Sarah. She felt a wave of heat and energy coursing through her body. Visions passed before her. Eyes, verdant fields spreading across deserts, forests being reborn in devastated areas, communities thriving in harmony with nature. When the light dissipated, Sarah fell to her knees, breathless. She understood in that moment that the true magic of the tree wasn't in its sap or any physical property. It was in the wisdom it represented, in the deep connection between humanity and nature. With renewed clarity, Sarah knew what she needed to do. Dreamland Orchard wouldn't be just a place of production or training. It would be a symbol, a living reminder of the responsibility we have to the planet. In the months that followed, Sarah worked tirelessly to implement her vision. The training center was expanded, now including environmental education programs for children and young people. Partnerships were established with universities and research institutes focused on developing sustainable agricultural techniques. Jason's trial finally came to an end, resulting in a sentence of community service. To the surprise of many, Sarah offered for him to serve his sentence at Dreamland Orchard itself, believing that redemption and learning were possible. As autumn approached, bringing with it a new harvest of apples, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey they had traveled. Dreamland Orchard had faced challenges, betrayals, and near ruin, but emerged stronger and more meaningful than ever. As the sun set over the trees laden with fruit, Sarah smiled, feeling a deep gratitude. The true miracle, she realized, wasn't the magical tree itself, but how its presence had transformed so many lives, including her own. Dreamland Orchard continued to grow and flourish, not just with apples, but with hope, knowledge, and a new generation of guardians of the earth. And Sarah knew that, as long as there were people willing to listen to the whispers of the trees and respect the secrets of nature, there would always be dreams ready to bear fruit. Winter was approaching. Dreamland Orchard, bringing with it cold winds and the promise of change. Sarah, now recognized as a visionary leader in the field of sustainable agriculture, faced new challenges and opportunities. On a cold autumn morning, as the last apples were being harvested, Sarah received an unexpected visit. An official government car stopped at the gates of the orchard, and from it descended an imposing figure, the Secretary of the Environment, Dr. Eleanor Davis. "Ms. Miller," the secretary greeted with a warm smile. "Your work here has drawn a lot of attention in Washington. We're interested in implementing your methods on a national scale." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. "It's an honor, Secretary, but our methods are based on a delicate balance with nature. It's not something that can simply be replicated on a large scale." The Secretary nodded, understanding. "I understand your concern. That's why I'm here personally. We want to learn, not just copy." In the days that followed, Sarah guided the Secretary and her team through the orchard, explaining not just the techniques, but the philosophy behind each decision. She spoke about the importance of respecting natural cycles, working in harmony with the local ecosystem, and valuing traditional knowledge. During one of these walks, they approached the area where the magical tree grew. Sarah always took care not to draw direct attention to it, but noticed that the secretary stopped, as if hypnotized by its presence. "There's something special here," Eleanor murmured, her eyes fixed on the tree with golden leaves. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "The entire orchard is special, Secretary. Each tree has its own history and importance." The secretary turned to Sarah, her eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Ms. Miller, I think I understand now why your methods are so effective. It's not just about technique, but a deep connection with the land." That moment marked a turning point in the negotiations. The government's proposal evolved from a simple replication of techniques to a comprehensive program of education and agricultural transformation. Dreamland Orchard would be the center of a new research and training institute, focused on developing sustainable agricultural practices adapted to different regions of the country. As the plans developed, Sarah found herself facing a new dilemma. Expansion meant more resources, more research, more possibilities to do good, but it also meant more scrutiny, more people circulating through the orchard, more risks for the secret of the magical tree. It was Emily who offered an enlightening perspective during one of their long nighttime conversations. "Sarah, what if the real secret isn't the tree itself, but what it taught us? The connection, the respect, the harmony with nature. That's something we can share without limits." Emily's words echoed deeply within Sarah. She realized that the time had come to trust not just a few chosen people, but an entire new generation of guardians of the earth. With this new clarity, Sarah called a meeting with her closest team, Robert, Martha, Emily, and even Jason, who had redeemed himself through his dedicated work in the orchard. "It's time we share the whole truth," Sarah announced, her voice firm despite the nervousness she felt. "The secret of the magical tree can no longer be just ours. It belongs to the world." The reaction was mixed. Robert expressed concern about possible consequences, while Martha smiled serenely, as if she had been expecting this moment. Jason, surprisingly, was one of the most enthusiastic supporters of the idea. "I spent so much time seeing the tree as a resource to be exploited," he admitted, "that I lost sight of its true lesson. Now I understand that its power lies in what it teaches, just not in what we can extract from it." With the support of her team, Sarah developed a careful plan to reveal the complete story of Dreamland Orchard. They would organize a major event, inviting scientists, community leaders, government representatives, and the media. The day of the event arrived, bringing with it an electric energy of anticipation. The orchard was at the height of its autumn beauty, the trees laden with ripe apples shining under the golden sun. Sarah climbed onto the improvised stage, facing a diverse and curious audience. With a deep sigh, she began to tell the story of the magical tree, of how its appearance had transformed not just the orchard, but an entire community and a way of thinking about agriculture. As she spoke, a murmur of amazement ran through the crowd. Some seemed skeptical, others marveled. When Sarah finished her account, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by an explosion of questions and animated discussions. To Sarah's surprise, the general reaction was one of fascination and respect, not greed or disbelief. Scientists offered to study the tree in a non-invasive way, seeking to understand its secrets without disturbing it. Community leaders saw in it a symbol of hope and renewal. The Secretary of the Environment, present at the event, took the stage to make a surprising announcement. The government would declare Dreamland Orchard a special protection area, ensuring its preservation and responsible study for future generations. In the months that followed, Dreamland Orchard transformed into a pilgrimage center for environmentalists, scientists, and curious people from around the world. But true to its mission, Sarah ensured that the focus remained on education and the promotion of sustainable agricultural practices. The Research Institute flourished, developing new techniques inspired by the principles learned from the magical tree. Farmers from all over the country, and soon from other countries, came to learn and take back not just technical knowledge, but a new philosophy of connection with the land. One afternoon, as the sun set over another productive day at The orchard. Sarah found Emily sitting under the magical tree, writing in a notebook. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked, curious. Emily smiled, showing the notebook. "I'm writing our story, the story of Dreamland Orchard, so we never forget where we came from and what we learned." Sarah felt tears of emotion forming in her eyes. She sat down beside Emily, observing the golden leaves swaying gently in the evening breeze. "You know," Sarah said, her voice soft, "when all this began, I thought the miracle was the tree, but now I see that the true miracle is the people. How we united, how we learned, how we grew." Emily nodded, understanding deeply. "And that's a magic we can spread without limits." As the stars began to dot the night sky, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey they had traveled. Dreamland Orchard had transformed into something much bigger than she could ever have imagined. It was now a beacon of hope, a living reminder that when we work in harmony with nature, true miracles can happen. And so, under the watchful eye of the magical tree, a new generation of guardians of the earth grew, promising to carry forward the most precious lesson from Dreamland Orchard, that the greatest power lies not in possessing secrets, but in sharing wisdom and cultivating hope. Years passed since the revelation of the secret of Dreamland Orchard. What was once a simple family orchard had transformed into a worldwide epicenter of sustainable agricultural innovation. Sarah, now with gray hair at her temples, watched with pride the legacy they had built. On a cool spring morning, Sarah walked through the orchard with her granddaughter Sophie, a 12-year-old girl with the same curious eyes that she had in her youth. End of story.